I've moved. Not once, but twice. Since the last Zealandism that you actually watched today, I am filled with a great amount of suffocating fear that I am finally going to be found by those authorities that are attempting to find me. But I, in my desperation to talk about football or soccer, whatever you want to call it, on the internet, it knows no bounds. I must continue, although it puts my life and my well-being in great danger. And now I say I moved twice because I went to a different hotel, and at the hotel that we ended up at, they then couldn't get the power working in the room that we were staying in. So I then moved to a second room. I can only assume that the power in this other room was not working because they were trying to stop me from making these videos. It's the only logical explanation, the only possible explanation for why power would just happen to be out in the one room in the hotel that they were trying to put us in. So I've been relocated again. Now, I have my suspicions, mainly because the background seems to be some sort of comforter that is just put up on the wall. And maybe this is some sort of insane asylum. I don't know. It does look like I'm in some sort of padded room or something, sitting here in the dark talking to you. But there are matters of great importance that we do actually need to discuss. First of all, Canada has made it farther than Brazil in Copa America. Now, that does sound impossible, mainly because Copa America is not a hockey competition. This is an actual footballing competition in which Brazil is supposed to dominate Canada in every possible facet until the end of time. Now, there is a huge contributing factor to this that I'm going to point out off the top just because it annoys me. Apparently, the explanation is that it is too hot to play 120 minutes, but that's bullshit, honestly. Like, seriously, if we could pull off the Qatar World Cup and everybody was saying it's fine, I've yet to hear an actual reasonable explanation for why Copa America is only playing 90 minutes and then going straight to penalties like it's the Carabao Cup. It doesn't make any sense to me, and as a result, 3 of the 4 quarterfinals that were played in Copa America went to penalties, advancing Canada, notably. They ended up beating Venezuela on a penalty shootout. Argentina managed to beat Ecuador on a penalty shootout. And Uruguay managed to defeat Brazil in a penalty shootout, which means down to our final 4 teams of Argentina, Canada, Colombia, and Uruguay. But while I'm not focusing on any of those 4 teams in this video, we are focusing on Brazil. Well, a little bit of Uruguay, but mostly Brazil, because the Brazilian national team has hit a snag. And they are now entering something I would like to call the post-Neymar era, where that snag is going to continue to get even worse. Because Copa America has been a respite for a Brazilian national team that has struggled mightily in the World Cup, which is the feature piece for Brazil, the nation that it'd be impossible if you don't know this and you're already watching this channel, has the most World Cups in history. They have 5. But ever since they won their last one, they've only gone past the quarterfinals one time. And they lost 7-1 in the semifinal, right? Like, it has not been a prosperous time for Brazil in World Cups since then. If you don't believe me, if that sounds absolutely unbelievable, here are the facts. They went champion, runners-up, champion, and then have done quarterfinals in 4 of the last 5 World Cups, with only one where they managed to finish a measly 4th place. Now, granted, Neymar wasn't playing in those matches, but in Copa America, it's been a very, very different story. Recently, Brazil has managed to win a Copa America recently and has made the finals both times and has avoided largely that sort of massive disappointment, except for 2016, which most people aren't aware of. It's kind of the final death nail in that team that lost 7-1 to Germany in the semifinal. They then got grouped at Copa America, changed around everything, and then won the whole tournament. Well, now we've seen them fall out of the tournament in the quarterfinals in the same way they seem to always exit the World Cup in the quarterfinals. Playing good teams in the knockouts has just not gone well for Brazil. Now, they got a little unlucky against Croatia in the most recent World Cup, but when you start to zoom out and look at broader trends, which there's clearly a broader trend here, Brazil's just not as good as it used to be. And it really hasn't been since the early 2000s. That's an uncomfortable fact. It's an uncomfortable fact for me. It's an uncomfortable fact for you. It's an uncomfortable fact for the entire Brazilian populace, that the fact that Brazil, a nation that worships this game, is just not able to produce a full national team that is capable of reaching the heights that it is so used to reaching, especially over that golden era where it was able to win 2 of 3 World Cups and just generally dominate the sport. That Brazil, the Brazil that when I first started paying attention to the sport, right, that existed, it's gone. And it does, look, it might be coming back soon, but it's not here yet. The only reason I say it might be coming back soon is Vinicius didn't play in this game against Uruguay. Rodrigo and Endrick, they're a part of that new generation that is bringing out a new Brazilian attack that might actually at least scratch the surface of the heights that the attacking talent of Brazil 20 years ago was able to reach. But my goodness, if you actually watched the game with Uruguay, I was able to catch the extended highlights because I'm currently in Germany where that match kicked off at 3 a.m., so I was not up for it. But you watch the extended highlights, something that jumps out at you right away is that Brazil didn't deserve to win the game based off of the flow of the game over 90 minutes. Now, I am aware of the fact that Uruguay played terrorist ball. They did. Uruguay committed a number of fouls that would be considered illegal by the Geneva Convention. They committed 26 fouls in this game. Brazil tacked on 15 more for a grand total of 41 fouls, which, by the way, is the most in any Copa America match this year, which is insane. And huge shout out to Marcelo Bielsa for just embracing the chaos there. Uruguay also got a red card in the 71st minute, which means Brazil, including added time, had over 20 minutes to try and score against a 10-man Uruguay. And I'll be honest, they didn't really create a serious chance of note over that period of time, despite all of their alleged attacking talent. And there is a lot of individual talent on Brazil. There's always going to be a lot of individual talent on Brazil. But Brazil's doing something that maybe Germany had just done, that England has certainly done, that Spain has certainly done in its history, that Portugal definitely has done in its history, that France did for most of its history. It's waning. Like every other national team has waxed and waned and had an era or a generation where they just didn't reach the heights that they were supposed to, despite seemingly the talent on the team. Brazil's just doing it now. I know it feels like I'm wording this a couple of different ways, but it's really just me processing the fact that that is the truth, right? I feel like up to this point, given one result or another, or some sort of freak accident or a penalty shootout loss or whatever, you could justify the fact that Brazil was just losing close matches and tight matches against opponents that were also very talented. And now, honestly, the United States played Uruguay as well, and it was a pretty similar result. The United States also just drew Brazil in a friendly, and Brazil also drew Costa Rica over the course of this tournament. This problem's not just endemic over the last month or two, it's endemic over the last, 10, 12 years. But it just shows that Brazil is not trending in the right direction. And weirdly enough, the Brazilian manager, Dorival Jr., he's coming back. He's going to manage the team going into the World Cup, which I don't know if that's necessarily something I agree with, given the results that he's been able to put together so far. Or maybe that's just a sign of the fact that the Brazilian Federation is a little more accepting of, I don't want to call it failure, but coming in well below expectations than you would expect. Now, as for the match itself, in the flow of the match, Uruguay created some good chances. Like, it ended up 0-0 to the penalty shootout, of course, because you only play 90 minutes and go straight to pens. I can't get over how unbelievably stupid that is. But Uruguay might have had the better chances. There was one big moment for Darwin Nunez where there was a cross that came in and he was right in front of the goal, basically, and just headed over because he's Darwin Nunez. I mean, it's just kind of what he does at this point. Brazil had one big opportunity, particularly in the first half, I believe it was, where there was a terrible back pass from Matias Vinha, but they weren't able to take advantage of it. The finishing standard was not there. It felt eerily reminiscent of certain Euros matches where both teams get a couple of chances, neither are able to take them, and we just decide to settle it in a penalty shootout. And in the penalty shootout, Uruguay just held its nerve. Uruguay took better penalties. And Uruguay's goalkeeper is much worse. There's no other way to slice it. I mean, Alisson Becker is arguably the best goalkeeper in the world. And the guy who's the goalkeeper for Uruguay, I was like looking up during the match. I'm going to be honest with you. He's a 31-year-old that plays for Internacional in Brazil. And Ricochet, or whatever his name is, he had a good shootout. He did a good job. I thought he got closer to more of them than Alisson. It's always tough to judge a goalkeeper on a shootout. I mean, there is always an element of luck to it, but he did well. But the penalties from Brazil were just worse. Now, they said all the right things after the game, as they're going to do. And I was really impressed. Endrick, by the way, he's getting slated too much for this match. Endrick was responsible for creating one or two of the good chances that Brazil had, took a couple of sharp shots. He just wasn't able to contribute to the build-up effectively, but for crying out loud, the kid's 17. It was his first start for Brazil, by the way, which is a bold choice by Dorival Jr. to do that going into the first knockout match against the Brazil team that you knew was going to sharpen up their knives and kind of go after him. And he did get fouled a lot. But I was impressed with the way Endrick came out after the game, right? I'm not trying to feed into his aura or anything, right? But I was just legitimately impressed with the composure of a 17-year-old to say, look, I know it doesn't look very good right now, but we're trying to build towards the World Cup and we're going to need all the fans behind us. So hopefully we can go and win that World Cup in 2 years. That was basically what he said. The team is kind of echoing that. They're saying the right things. But saying the right things is one thing, and getting results in the field is another. And Brazil is not getting the results in the field right now, and they got knocked out of Copa America in the quarterfinal. The quarterfinal. They got less far than Canada, and it just felt like I would be remiss if I didn't make a Zealandism about that, even if I am hiding in a cave to avoid being captured by whoever's chasing me. We're still kind of trying to figure that out. Was it the CIA? Was it MI6? What if it's both? And Interpol? Maybe. Probably because I'm wearing a Bucky's hat in Europe. That's probably why they're coming after me.